Everyone tells you that 6 figures is the finish line. It is the golden ticket that separates the struggling from the successful. Growing up, I believed that if I could just hit that magical number of $100,000 a year, all my problems would evaporate. I thought I would be walking into a life of freedom, investment portfolios, and zero stress. I imagined myself in a tailored suit, looking out over the city skyline, finally feeling safe. I crossed that line when I was 27 years old. I remember staring at the offer letter in my hands. It was heavy, printed on thick, expensive paper. The salary line read, $100,000. I felt like I had beaten the game. I called my mom. I called my friends. I walked down the street feeling taller, like I was part of a secret club that owned the city. The air even tasted different. It tasted like victory. But here is the confession no one wants to make at a dinner party. Exactly 3 years later, despite earning over $300,000 in cumulative income during that period, I had less money than when I started. I didn't have savings. I didn't have assets. What I had was $30,000 in consumer debt and a leased car I was terrified to drive because I couldn't afford the deductible if I crashed it. I was what economists call a high earner, not rich yet. I was broke, but I was broke in a designer suit. And today, I'm going to tell you exactly how it happened, detailing every trap I fell into so you don't make the same mistake. The first thing they don't teach you in school is that $100,000 on paper is not $100,000 in your pocket. This was my first slap in the face. When I got my first paycheck, I was expecting a massive influx of cash. I had already mentally spent it on plans and dreams. But then I looked at the deductions: federal tax, state tax, Social Security, Medicare. It felt like everyone had their hand in my pocket before I even got to touch the money. Depending on where you live, that 6-figure salary gets a haircut of about 30 to 35% before it even hits your direct deposit. So my $100,000 was actually closer to $70,000. That is about $5,800 a month. Now don't get me wrong, that is a lot of money. It is a privilege. But it is not the buy a private island money that my ego thought it was. It is decent money, but it is finite. The problem was that I made spending decisions based on the gross number, the 100K, not the net number that actually hit the bank. I mentally budgeted for a rich man's life while taking home a middle-class reality. This mathematical disconnect is the seed of financial ruin. I looked at the gross salary and thought I was wealthy. I ignored the taxes, and that ignorance was the first step toward the cliff. I was playing a game of mathematics where I refused to look at the minus signs. Then came the silent killer. In finance, we call it lifestyle creep. It is subtle. It doesn't happen all at once with one giant purchase. It happens in inches. It started with the apartment. I was living in a perfectly fine studio in a cheaper part of town. My rent was manageable. But now I was a 6-figure earner. The voice in my head started whispering that 6-figure earners don't live in studios next to a noisy highway. So I moved. I signed a lease for a luxury 1-bedroom apartment downtown. It had a gym I never used, a concierge who didn't know my name, and a view of another building. My rent doubled overnight. I justified it by saying I needed a better environment to be productive. I told myself it was an investment in my career, that I needed a sanctuary to rest so I could earn more. It wasn't. It was an investment in my vanity. This triggered something called the Diderot effect. It is a social phenomenon where obtaining a new possession leads to a spiral of consumption. Once you upgrade your home, everything else looks out of place. My old furniture, which served me well for years, suddenly looked trashy in the new apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows. So I bought a new velvet couch on a credit card. I bought a massive television. I filled the space with things that matched the aesthetic of the apartment, but didn't match the reality of my bank account. The craziest part is that you adapt to the luxury instantly. Within 3 weeks, the fancy apartment didn't feel special anymore. It just felt normal. And that is the trap. Once luxury becomes your new baseline, you can never go back down without feeling like a failure. Let's talk about the car. This is the classic mistake, and I walked right into it with my eyes wide open. I was driving a 5-year-old Japanese sedan. It was paid off. It was reliable. It got me from point A to point B perfectly. But pulling up to my new office building, parking next to Porsches and Teslas, I felt insecure. I felt like an imposter. I worried that my bosses would look at my car and think I wasn't ambitious enough. I convinced myself that to be taken seriously in business, I needed to look the part. So I went to the dealership. I didn't buy a car. I leased a German luxury sedan. The salesman told me the monthly payment was only $600. I thought, easy, I make $5,000 a month. I can afford $600. But it wasn't just $600. The insurance for a luxury car is double. The car required premium gas, not regular. The maintenance costs were astronomical. I remember paying $400 for a simple oil change and service. Suddenly, that car was costing me over $1,000 a month. That is $12,000 a year just to look successful at traffic lights. I was literally burning my wealth to impress strangers who didn't care about me. But the dopamine hit of driving that car was addictive. For the first few months, I felt powerful. But power doesn't pay the bills. Then there was the social aspect, the part nobody really calculates. When you start making money, your social circle shifts, or you try to force it to shift. I started dating, and I wanted to impress. I wasn't taking dates to the local taco spot anymore. I was booking tables at places with no prices on the menu online. I wanted to be the guy who ordered the nice bottle of wine without looking at the cost. I wanted to be the generous friend who picks up the tab at the bar. "Don't worry, guys, I got this," I would say. Those 4 words cost me thousands. I was buying validation. I was buying friendship, or at least I thought I was. In reality, I was attracting people who liked my wallet, not my personality. Every weekend became a contest of who could have the most Instagrammable life. And the price of admission to that contest was my financial future. The big purchases like the car and the apartment are obvious, but what really drained me were the small, invisible leaks. It's what I call death by 1,000 cuts. When you feel rich, you stop looking at price tags in the grocery store. You stop asking if you really need another subscription service. I started eating out for lunch every single day. $15 here, $20 there. It seems small, but $20 a day is $600 a month. That is $7,000 a year just on sandwiches and salads I could have made at home for a fraction of the cost. I upgraded my wardrobe because my old clothes didn't match my new car. I got the latest phone, the best smartwatch, the fastest internet package. These expenses seem insignificant on their own. What is $10 for a cocktail? Nothing. But when you add up 50 of those little decisions every month, you are talking about thousands of dollars. I was bleeding money from 100 different wounds, and I was too arrogant to put a bandage on any of them. I stopped tracking my spending because deep down I knew it was bad. Avoiding my bank app became a daily ritual. If I didn't see the balance, the problem didn't exist. And then the anxiety started. You would think that earning high income brings peace. For me, it brought chaos. I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, doing mental math. I knew exactly when my paycheck hit, and I knew exactly when the rent check cleared. There was a window of about 12 hours every month where I felt safe. The rest of the month was a juggling act. I was robbing Peter to pay Paul. I used one credit card to pay off another. I applied for a balance transfer card to hide the debt from myself. I was earning more than 90% of the population, Yet I was living with the same financial stress as someone earning minimum wage. The difference was I had no excuse. This wasn't bad luck. This was stupidity. The house of cards collapsed in November. It wasn't a tragic event, it was just life. I had a dental emergency that insurance didn't fully cover. The bill was $1,200. I remember standing at the reception desk, handing over my platinum credit card, the one that made a nice heavy sound when it hit the counter. I tried to look casual, checking my emails on my expensive phone. The receptionist ran it. She looked at me, then looked at the screen and whispered, "I am sorry, it was declined." I felt the blood drain from my face. I told her to run it again. Surely it was a mistake. Declined. I tried my debit card. Declined. I had to step out and call my bank, pretending it was a fraud alert error so the people in the waiting room wouldn't think I was broke. But it wasn't an error. I had maxed out my credit limit and drained my checking account. I sat in my luxury car, wearing my expensive watch, parked outside the dentist's office, and I cried. I realized I was a fraud. I had a high income, but I had zero wealth. Actually, I had negative wealth. I was poorer than when I was a student. The stress was physically painful. I couldn't sleep. I was constantly anxious about the next bill. The golden handcuffs were cutting into my wrists, and I had locked them myself. That day was my turning point. I realized that looking rich and being rich are often inversely related. Most people you see flashing money are doing exactly what I did, financing a lifestyle they cannot afford. I had to make a choice. Continue the charade until I went bankrupt, or swallow my pride and start over. I chose to start over. The recovery was harder than the fall. It required a complete ego death. I had to admit to myself and to others that I couldn't afford my life. I started by selling things. I sold the furniture I had bought on credit for half the price I paid. That hurt. Seeing a $2,000 couch go for $800 is a painful lesson in depreciation. I got rid of the car. Returning the lease early came with a penalty, but it stopped the bleeding. I bought a used bicycle and took the bus. I broke the lease on the apartment and moved into a smaller place with a roommate. It was embarrassing. My ego took a massive beating. People asked if I lost my job. I had to tell them no, I just woke up. I stopped going to the expensive dinners. I lost some friends during that time, people who were only there for the free drinks. Good riddance. It took me 2 years of living well below my means to pay off the debt. I used the avalanche method, paying off the highest interest cards first. Every extra dollar went to the debt. No vacations, no new clothes, no upgrades, just work and repayment. But slowly, something shifted. As the debt went down, my anxiety went down. Watching my net worth go from negative $30,000 to zero was the best feeling of my life. Reaching zero felt like becoming a millionaire. Today, I make less than I did back then. I took a job with less stress and more meaning. But my net worth, it keeps growing. I drive a paid-off car. I live in a home I can easily afford. I cook my own meals. And when I go to sleep at night, I don't stare at the ceiling doing mental math. I sleep like a baby. If you are chasing that 6-figure salary, go for it. Earn as much as you can. Ambition is good. But remember my story. Income is just the shovel. Wealth is the pile of dirt you build with it. If you throw the dirt away as fast as you shovel it, you will end up standing in a hole. Don't dig your own grave with a golden shovel. Keep your lifestyle simple. Invest the difference. Build a gap between your ego and your income. Real wealth is quiet. It's the money you don't spend. It's the freedom to say no to things you don't want to do. Don't let the world trick you into buying a life you can't afford just to impress people you don't even like. I hope this story saves you a few years of your life.